And good Tuesday afternoon. My name is Ryan Belmore, owner and publisher of What's Up Noop. It is Tuesday, October 8th, and it is City Council time. City Council returns for a council meeting tomorrow night, Wednesday, October 9th. Leading up to the meeting and after the meeting, we've invited all of the current council members to join us to discuss any items on the agenda, recap anything. Because it's an election season, we're asking them to stick to the agenda. So I'll put that out there that this has been open to everybody, and we appreciate those that joined us around the last meeting. And joining us today to preview tomorrow's meeting is Newport Mayor Xaykham. Mayor, how are you?
I'm great, Ryan. How are you?
Good. So first of all, I just want to remind everybody that the meeting is taking place at Pell Elementary School.
Yes, meeting location has been a bit of an issue for us. The elevator at City Hall, which is crucial to our meetings being open and available to everybody, regardless of their mobility, unfortunately are broken. And so that has required us to relocate to locations that are ADA accessible. The Pell School, thanks to the folks over at the schools, have been very accommodative at including us in their space over there. And so we're looking forward to hosting the meeting over there. I actually think it's good for the council to get off the dais every once in a while and the ride circuit a bit, getting out in other parts of the city. So we are embracing the opportunity we have to take our city council on the road into the neighborhoods.
Any idea on how long they'll be at Pell Elementary? Any status update on the elevator?
We're still waiting to hear back, right? This has been an ongoing, persistent maintenance issue. This is an elevator that was installed a number of years ago, but it is not a particularly old piece of infrastructure. So installed prior to me coming to the city. Very disappointing, obviously, that this elevator continuously keeps breaking down. I know the city is looking at what it can be done in the future to ensure that this stays open and operational. In the meantime, like I said, we've had great flexibility from the Pell School. We were at Innovate Newport last night for an excellent workshop on the parking issue in the city. So it's a good excuse for us to get out into the community and to take our meetings a little bit closer to those who might not otherwise be able to make it down to City Hall.
It's an agenda item. Any kind of an agenda item? It was a public meeting. Any takeaways from last night's workshop?
Yes, last night's workshop was excellent. It was almost 2.5 hours long. We covered a range of different parking issues and did a review of the Interdepartmental Traffic Commission, which is the body through which residents go in order to request changes to traffic patterns, to parking, and other matters related to how traffic moves around our city itself. What we found pretty quickly in this meeting is that our parking ordinance is very complicated, and it has evolved over time really to accommodate just about anybody who is looking for a parking pass, regardless of whether or not they are a consistent member of this community. And so what we really tried to zero in on are what are the problem areas itself. We have heard consistently that there are rampant abuses within the system. One example is that there are a number of short-term rentals that have 15, 20, even 30 parking passes. That obviously creates a tremendous amount of strain on our neighborhoods and is not the original intent. And a resident brought up a very good point, which is, with having a parking system this loose, where just about anybody can get a parking pass, what you've done is you have essentially given many private sector operators the benefit of having unfettered parking as an amenity for the parcels of property that they own. But to the extent that there's a loss, to the extent that residents can't find parking, to the extent that we have to pay for enforcement, we've socialized those losses themselves. And so we've privatized the gain, we've socialized the losses. That's something we need to get on top of in order to maintain residents' quality of life. So last night was an eye-opening workshop for us. Clearly, this is an ordinance that needs to be simplified to refocus on how we make sure that our parking system works for the people that live and work here year-round.
And I imagine with all of that, there's also a loss on the city's part in revenue. With so many parking passes, so many I don't want to call them illegal parking passes, but passes that aren't in the right hands, you're not generating revenue off of as many cars.
Yeah, the term resident parking actually does not mean resident. It means anybody who has a mailbox in Newport, and that is highly problematic when we see the volume of traffic and parking that our community is facing. The other thing we addressed is the fact that the current fine structure for parking illegally in our city, whether it's blocking a crosswalk or handicap space, is not a substantial deterrent. When you consider that downtown parking can cost as much as $60 for an evening, to think that you'd only get a $40 parking ticket parking on the street really is not a deterrent. We're finding many people are just taking their chances, parking on the street, blocking crosswalks, parking in handicap spaces, because the relative fine and penalty is close to equivalent to what they'd be paying for parking anyways. We need to modernize that so it actually is an effective deterrent and help with the parking.
City Council kicks off tomorrow night with a executive session followed by the regular council meeting at 6:30. The agenda, based on the last couple, looks pretty easy to me, but what's on there that people should know about?
Ryan, thanks for jinxing us on that one. We're really cruising along. Look, council meetings vary in terms of what drives conversation on the agenda. Sometimes it's ordinance changes that are brought forth by administration in response to requests that the council has asked, like they have been recently around issues like short-term rentals and housing. Other times it's resolutions, statements from the council itself about different areas of policy that are very important to members of the council. And other times it's administrative action forms, things that are coming forth in the administration that are important to us. I do want to note a couple things on the agenda, though. First, we do have that executive session, an important piece of litigation that's been outstanding for a period of time. The Ann Street Pier is a pier that historically existed off the Maritime Center. We've been in litigation on our ability to rebuild that pier. This would be a public pier. Another great opportunity to open up the waterfront to our residents. We hear consistently that the waterfront feels built up. And so we have been clamoring and scrapping to find any opportunity we can to expand our access to the waterfront. The Ann Street Pier would be an example of that. We are getting an update from our solicitor in the executive session to decide if there's a clear pathway forward to try and bring that access to the public sooner rather than later. Then we move to the Board of License Commissioners. This is something that typically used to occur at the back end of our meetings, but what we were finding is that a lot of the people that make this community run on a day-to-day basis, whether it's businesses or nonprofits that are having special events, were stuck sitting through the entirety of the council's meetings for items that were relatively ministerial in terms of their approval, things that were not controversial. We're taking that up front so we can allow those folks to get back to doing their good work in the community. And then we dive into the actual council docket itself. And that's where we have a number of items to discuss that are very business focused this month. We have some appointments to boards and commissions that are very important to keeping the city well informed and operating. And then we also have a number of city manager action forms. So updates from the city manager on different issues and areas that we have asked the administration to look into. If you'd like, I can dive into those now, or I can take this in whatever direction you'd like.
Yeah, what I will ask you to dive into them. I do just want to make a quick note regarding number 7, the memorandum from the city manager. I'm sure you're going to hit on that. I also just want to point out that the city manager will be joining us for a conversation next Wednesday at 10 a.m. And he and I have chatted, and we do plan on spending it on the bond item. So if the mayor doesn't hit it right now, we'll probably dive into it more for a full 30 minutes next Wednesday as well.
Look, Ryan, I spend my entire career talking about bonds, so I'm happy to talk about bonds whenever you want. I realize it's not always the most exciting thing. But let's start with another item that I think is an important piece of policy, and this is a memorandum on seasonal rentals. This was brought forth as a result of a resolution from Councilor Lima, who is in her final term on the council right now, really looking at what is eroding our housing stock right now. Are things problematic, and do we need to take a new approach to ensuring that we have both enforcement and that there is some reasonable balance between properties in residential neighborhoods that are being used for business purposes versus those that are being used primarily as residences. Seasonal rentals are one of these pieces that sort of straddle the two worlds, right? They are properties that may be occupied on a month-to-month basis for 1, 2, or 3 months. And then for the balance of the year, they might be occupied by a member of the military, they might be occupied by a Salve student, or what we're seeing increasingly, they may sit vacant for the majority of the year. U.S. Census found that 1 in 4 homes in Newport sit vacant for the majority of the year. And we're not talking about those Gilded Age mansions down on Bellevue Avenue that were built for that purpose. We're talking about middle-class family homes in Newport neighborhoods. And the seasonal rentals have not gotten the same level of attention that short-term rentals have. The council now, I think, is taking a careful look at just how big is that population of housing stock. Is that housing stock that actually would otherwise be being used for residents, or are we closing a gap in the market that exists right now in Newport, which obviously has been a very popular destination. So I expect to see a robust conversation around whether or not we're charging appropriate fees for the registration of that line up with the expense of actually enforcing the seasonal rental restrictions that exist in our community, and whether or not there are additional actions the city should be taking to track those seasonal rentals. From that point, we then move to a quick action item that is much more typical of what you'd see under this section. It is an update on the app that's being used for parking. You might remember the city invested heavily in technology to allow us to use dynamic pricing for our parking. What this allows us to do is charge closer to a market rate in certain zones. So when we're at peak busyness, we're able to charge a bit more than we might on an otherwise quiet winter day. And the revenues off that have allowed us in turn to offer residents up to 2 hours of free parking across the city and to extend the beach parking season. Those are things that were made possible by shifting the burden of parking off residents onto those visitors who are coming into our community. We appreciate those visitors coming in. We're just trying to make sure that the cost of sustaining those visitors and welcoming them here is actually paid for by those who come through our community on a day-to-day basis. I'll remind you that of our city budget, less than $10 million a year comes in from direct tourism related taxes. Most of that funding that's coming in on whether it's sales tax or hotel tax is going right upstate to Providence. And so our ability to make sure that we're able to offset some of our expenses is really important. And that really takes us to
I was just going to say, can you just explain for our viewers the conversation that will be happening around items 5, 6, the memorandum on season rentals, the service agreement? Is it just an approval? Do you want people to come and share and participate? What should people know is happening with these?
On item 5, that'll be a discussion with the council itself, not a full workshop discussion like you saw last night on parking or like you saw last week on Admiral Kalfas Road. This will be a more limited conversation, but really it's the chance for the council to ask questions about the memorandum that was put forth and to ask the administration to look into this more deeply. We have consistently offered the public opportunity to comment even on items like this that are more business related, because anybody who's taking the time to come out to a council meeting, we think deserves the opportunity to have a few minutes to touch on an issue if it's important to them on the agenda. In addition to that, if there is an item that's not on the agenda that's still important for a resident to raise, there's a citizens forum at the very beginning of the council meeting where they can have several minutes to talk about any issue that is not on the agenda that they think might be important for the council to know about or to be considering.
And just to further point out, any changes to seasonal rentals will come in the form down the line in the form of a resolution and ordinance change. So there will be no changes following this. It will be a discussion.
That's correct. This is really to frame for us initially, what is the data telling us? Is this an issue? Is it not an issue? What adjustments need to be made in order for the system to be more fair and equitable? And from this is where I think you would see some level of direction from the council to administration to consider whether or not there could be ordinance changes that are put forth, whether we need to hire additional enforcement personnel, or whether this is something that's going to require additional study and research. And the administration, if they can't get clarity from the council on where they stand through our conversation, will ask for a resolution doing just that.
Excellent. And then item number 7 is the memorandum from the city manager.
Yes, this is a fiscal note. This is a memorandum really giving us an idea as to what the impact is of this bond on the long-term financial health of our community, what the bond is specifically going towards. We've discussed projects in the past. This council has voted to kind of give the general okay on the project list as it's been laid out. But this is really to dig in on the brass tacks of what is in the bond itself. I hear consistently from residents that they've not received enough information about what is in the bond. And if we want residents to consider whether or not this bond deserves their vote and support, they really deserve to have clarity as to what's in that. This is the council's opportunity to be hearing that directly from the city staff. Our finance director, Jim Nolan, has done a great job pulling together a lot of this information at the city manager's direction. So we'll have a very clear idea from that discussion as to what the impact of this bond is going to be on everything from the increase to taxes for the average taxpayer to the impact on our long-term public bond rating. I will tell you that the council thought very carefully about whether or not we could sustain a bond of this size. It was found in previous hearings and discussions that this was within a safe limit that would not threaten the city's long-term financial standing from the eyes of the market. This is an industry that I work in full-time. I have for almost 2 decades. So I'm very comfortable in those types of conversations and looking forward to hearing what our administration and staff have to tell us about the impact of this bond.
And for those watching at home, all of these documents that I'm sharing, everything that we're talking about is available on cityofnewport.com. You can go out and read it ahead of time. You can read this. This is the memorandum that I happen to open up, and you can get a preview and really digest, what the city manager is recommending, urging Newport voters, as well as some of the specific examples of what will be done at projects. There's a lot of disinformation, misinformation out there. Dive into it and be an informed voter and read it for yourself right on the City of Newport's website.
And he'll also be talking about efforts to help better inform voters that are taking on across the entire city. Almost every single neighborhood in Newport has a major project that would be funded by this bond. It's also important to note that this bond is being used to help leverage federal resources that are available to us. And so whether it's the funding that was committed to us for the Cliff Walk, whether it's the potential to help improve Easton's Beach and to make that more resilient for the future, downtown improvements to the waterfront, whether it's Prouty Park or to things like the Elm Street Pier. There are a lot of pieces of this bond that to varying degrees we are using as an ability to leverage state and federal funding. Oftentimes that is a 4-to-1 match that we receive. And so the bond money is very important to our ability to receive that match in the future. These are the types of issues that I hope the city manager will be elaborating on further beyond just what he included in the memo, and getting obviously very clear feedback from the council as to where within the community we need to be carrying this message so voters are informed and able to make their own decision on whether this is something they would like to support.
Excellent. There's just one last thing after that on the agenda.
There is indeed a very brief second reading of a designation of Dixon, changing the direction of traffic flow on Dixon itself. This is actually a very good example of the process and how we as a council can step in to make decisions when we feel that there's been a breakdown in the process. Residents on Dixon for a long time have been dealing with an increase in traffic flow up their street, an increase in the speeds of traffic flowing up their street, which was not supposed to be a through street. But I think for many of us who are used to kind of traversing through that section of town, Dixon is in fact a through street. And so in order to address that, the request that the citizens on that street made by a majority of those that live there is to reverse the direction of Dixon Street to help alleviate that traffic flow. They all believe that was the case. This went through the Interdepartmental Traffic Commission, which declined to push that idea forward. We as a council picked it up, ran with it, looked at it. The one thing that we're being very careful about and watching very carefully to ensure that we can take quick action if need be is the impact on surrounding streets like Hammond Street of any directional change that might happen. Or of the impact of that directional change once it's actually implemented. If we start to see problems on neighboring streets, we're committed to acting quickly to ensure that we're not just pushing this bubble of a problem around, that it's something that's being done to actually improve traffic flow in the city. We hear consistently as councilors, the traffic is moving too quickly and recklessly throughout our city. Our police department can only keep up with so many streets to patrol. And so we're trying to make sure that these issues are ones that are being concentrated in areas where the police have the resources to address them.
Mayor, anything else on the agenda? I just had one follow-up question here at the end, but anything else on the agenda that people should know about with the meeting?
Yeah, look, the appointments are something that oftentimes get overlooked, but I want to stress that
that's what's going to be my follow-up is, if you could talk about any open positions.
Our boards and commissions in the city are really the entities that do a tremendous amount of work ensuring that the city has constant guidance, is taking citizen feedback, and is helping to provide the council with really clear perspective on a number of issues, everything ranging from historic cemeteries to planning, zoning, and historic preservation. So I encourage citizens to apply. There's a link on our website where you can apply for boards and commissions. You can apply for multiple boards and commissions with one application. There are constantly openings coming up on boards and commissions across the city. It is the nature of people's terms expiring and also people having changes in their lives that allow them to continue serving. So I encourage people to look at and consider applying for boards and commissions. One recommendation I would have is if you haven't before, attend one of the meetings. Their meetings are open public meetings, just like the council's meetings. And it's a really good opportunity to get a feeling for the type of work that happens on boards and commissions before you decide to pull the trigger and actually step on to serve. And I know that for many boards and commissions, their members are more than happy to talk with interested parties about whether or not they might be a good fit for that board or commission itself. Ultimately, though, the decisions on who serves on boards and commissions belongs to the council, which votes to confirm members to different boards and commissions. So we have a few that are coming up on our agenda this week. One is the Historic District Commission. We currently have 2 alternate positions available on that. We've been interviewing for those positions. The way that we handle interviews is when we interview, it's not specifically for an immediate opening. It's just if you're interested in serving. Sometimes, though, interviews themselves will be accelerated because of immediate openings that happen. In this instance, the appointee is somebody that we had interviewed in an earlier round who the entire council liked quite a bit. He, in fact, was still interested, and so we're moving his appointment. With boards and commissions, we've been very focused on if there's a specific need that a commission has, for example, somebody who has a background that might be particularly applicable, or in the Historic Districts Commission example this week, somebody who's served on an HDC in another community that we think would bring great value to us. We try and prioritize those applications when it seems to be a fit for the commission itself. We are also considering an appointment to the Board of Canvassers. This is the Republican alternate position. The Board of Canvassers has a balance of Democrats and Republicans. The Republican City Committee has done good work recently reorganizing. They have put forth a name to us as a recommendation as required under the city's governing laws to for a Republican alternate. It's somebody who comes to the city with a tremendous amount of prior board and commission service in the city. And so we are thankful to the Republican City Committee for putting this name forward. We've interviewed her, and I'm hopeful that the council will vote to confirm. And the final is the Public Sculpture Commission. This is the commission that really advises on how the city's different monuments and memorials are maintained and what improvements and upgrades are needed to ensure their continued prominence across our entire city. This is more of an advisory commission, but they take on a great deal of work with stewardship of these historic assets. And so we will also be considering an appointment for that as well.
Excellent. Can you serve on more than one board or commission, or does it vary, that answer?
It really depends on the board and commission itself. We try and limit it to 2 regardless. But there are certain boards and commissions that are quite a bit of work. Some boards and commissions have multiple hours of meetings, and for every meeting, it can take a 2 to 3 times multiple to prepare for that meeting adequately. So there's some boards and commission, like the Historic District Commission or the Zoning Board, that just require an exceptional amount of work, and so it's not a great idea for people to serve on more than one. There are others where they're more advisory in nature, and people are able to serve on multiple boards and commissions. Like I said, typically no more than 2, unless there's some other restriction in statute that doesn't allow for that.
Excellent. Well, I think we hit on everything on the docket. The docket is available at cityofnewport.com. Please note that the meeting will take place at Pell Elementary School. It's not available to be live streamed, so you can't watch it live as it happens, but the video usually is available the following day up on the City of Newport's website, and we'll be watching and have a recap and all of that good stuff as well. Mayor, anything else?
Yeah, I'd touch on a prior workshop that we had. I don't think we've touched on it yet, right? Admiral Kalfas Road.
Oh, yes. Yep.
This is a workshop we had held last Wednesday. We had terrific turnout from the community. It was at Pell School, right adjacent, about a block away or 2 blocks away from Admiral Kalfas Road. Admiral Kalfas is a good example of where we have seen a portion of our community bear an undue burden from changes that have occurred. And so that's a continuous theme that we have here in Newport, where a relatively small resident population bears an enormous burden for things, whether it's tourism or construction related. Admiral Kalfas is one of those roads that had become something of a bypass. J.T. Connell Highway was designed for industrial level traffic. It is built to be able to sustain heavy truck traffic. What we found is that with the new highway off-ramp system that's been established, a lot of those trucks were coming out and taking a right and driving up through a residential neighborhood that also was very proximate to our elementary school. This was a substantial increase in truck traffic that ultimately was getting to the top of that hill and then taking a left and heading into Middletown. So at this workshop, we really considered what improvements have been made by the city to date to try and improve safety on that roadway. Things like high visibility crosswalk, speed cameras that'll be coming in, other types of signage that are helpful to improve safety, and what further can be done to help redivert truck traffic up Admiral Kalfas Road. Councilor Lima has been leading the charge on this effort. We have all been supporting her as a council. I'm very hopeful that she will bring forward a resolution at our next meeting to ensure that we finally address some of the traffic and truck traffic flow that's been very problematic for safety for residents on Admiral Kalfas. So stand by for that at a future meeting, but an excellent workshop, worth going back and watching if folks haven't before. A very good conversation from the council, looking at issues like whether or not this is going to push traffic onto surrounding streets and whether or not this is actually the type of change that could help improve safety on Admiral Kalfas Road. We're hopeful for that moving forward.
Excellent. So perhaps some items on the next agenda on October 23rd or November 13th coming up here. Excellent, Mayor. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this agenda. Any call to action for residents in regards to this meeting or any other workshops coming up?
I think it's engage and keep following. We are sorry that these can't be live streamed right now with the location challenges that we're having, but please engage. I know as a council, we really value it when residents attend, when they take the opportunity to speak on items. We welcome your public comment and appreciate your engagement with the city.
All righty. Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. So that is Mayor Tsai. And again, one more time, just in case, the meeting is taking place Wednesday, October 9th, 6:30 p.m. Pell Elementary School. Agenda is available on cityofnewport.com. And you can find all of the documents that we mentioned, all available right on there. You can click through any application, any Board of License application, special event licenses, licenses and permits, communications, seasonal rentals, all of that available on the website. Thanks for watching.